I've heard you talk about the Easter liturgy as a retreat experience. Can you share with us a little bit about your experience with that?
Well, fundamentally, it's a funny time of the year because there are Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. They're 4 separate days which are kind of linked to each other. The Thursday, Friday and Saturday are all part of one big mass kind of. It starts with the sign of the cross on Holy Thursday night, and the blessing at the end of the mass doesn't come until Holy Saturday evening after the vigil. So it's a mass that kind of begins on the Thursday night, doesn't end with a blessing or a dismissal. It ends in silence. Good Friday begins with silence and ends with a short prayer and then silence. And then Holy Saturday, if it was done in the past without coronavirus, begins outside in silence with the blessing of a fire and the candle. And at the end of which there's a grand dismissal. Go in the peace of Christ, Alleluia, Alleluia. And that marks what for us is the most significant liturgy in the church's calendar, and what in effect is one liturgy that runs over 3 days, and then we have the Easter Sunday Mass on the Sunday morning. So it's a big time. And I was always taught as a young Carmelite when I was a novice that this is a time of retreat, it's a time of prayer, because this great Mass doesn't really stop when you leave the church, and this year doesn't stop when you stop watching the telecast, but continues on, so that the period between the end of the Holy Thursday evening service and the beginning of the 3 o'clock Good Friday liturgy, that whole period is still a time of prayer, because you've just gone home, but you've not finished what began on the Thursday night. And when you leave the liturgy on Friday afternoon, it continues all through Saturday until the beginning of the vigil on Saturday night. So that's in fact the biggest period of prayer that we have in the church. It's so, the funny thing was, people used to go to Holy Thursday Mass and then go home and do things, watch TV, then they go to the Good Friday thing, and then after that they go to the movies or whatever. But this year, please God, because we're in some kind of lockdown, people will have time to spend with Jesus, to spend time in prayer, pondering what's happening in such a way that perhaps for many of us, this might be the first time people have done the Easter ceremonies properly as they should be, because you won't be going shopping, you won't be going to sport, you won't be going to the Easter show. In Sydney, kind of the problem was everyone would go to the Easter show in between things, but now you're in lockdown, in self-isolation, some people, with social distancing for others, that you have to spend time with yourself. And I think that means spending time with God, spending time in prayer, thinking about the important things. So I think this year will be a very special Holy Week, because whether we like it or not, we have the choice of spending time with God or not spending time with God. That's the way it's presenting itself. Yes, I would say if you've got a Sunday missal, follow it. If you don't, you can get an app. I think Universalis is a good app that would have what you need on it. And to follow what's happening. For example, Holy Thursday, more than anything else, is the greatest liturgy we have about love. It begins with what is love. Because the gospel is, and now he showed how perfect his love was, which is we won't see it reenacted, which is the washing of the feet, but it's about the the love that Jesus had for his disciples and so many people, it's not simply about the love that enabled him to go to the cross and die for us, but it was about the particular love he had for every individual person that was there at the Last Supper. You know, when he washed their feet, he looked into their eyes. They weren't feet that he washed, but they were people's feet. Judas's foot, Peter's foot, John's foot. And in doing that, he expressed his personal love for each of them. Even Judas, who he knew was going to betray him, he didn't refuse to wash Judas's feet. And it's a time to reflect on the extraordinariness of his love, which wasn't dependent upon whether this person would support me or love me. He showed how perfect his love was because it was impossible for him to love any of them more than he did. He loved Judas Iscariot perfectly. Otherwise he would have stopped him from going out and betraying him. So the Holy Thursday is about love, and the greatest aspect of that love is the way he wanted to remain with us always, even in our difficulties. And that's, you know, the Eucharist, communion, is given to us to support us now, but it's the way that he remains with us, that presence. To think that before he died, his concern was, what would you do? What would you do when I'm not here? So I give you this. Mm-hmm. So that that presence is always on Good Friday, but after we finish the first part of the great Easter liturgy on Holy Thursday evening, we go into a silence. And it's a time when we say, spend time with him. Spend time with him who's worrying about what's going to happen to him, who doesn't want to go to death, but because of love he willingly goes there. You know, we have things imposed upon us, as is happening now, this social distancing, and we wish it was otherwise, but we should accept it for love of others. So that if I happen to have it, I won't give it to someone else. It's not fundamentally the fear that I have that I might catch it, but that others might catch it. That's why we follow what the government is saying, because we love other people. And he willingly underwent all of this for love of us. And you might think, well, how am I going to spend my time alone? Then on Holy Thursday evening, spend your time with him, because he had to undergo all of these things which he didn't want. Then we move, the next step of the great liturgy is his passion and death. It's interesting, I would pick up John's Gospel and read it, because the passion on Good Friday comes in the Gospel of St. John, and read it and recognize the freedom of this man. He alone amongst anyone that's ever lived had the freedom to die. Now we, at this time, we're afraid of death, we're afraid of the unknown. But he had the freedom to enter the unknown and walk there, to go there. And the greatness of Jesus as we see him die was, there's a human being who was free to die. He had the freedom to die. I hope and pray that when my time comes, I will have the freedom to let go. I don't know. It's the unknown. And we walk with him in this. And while we mightn't be at the point of death, the world is full of people at the point of death. And if we walk with him, in our prayer, we are at one with, and we are supportive of all those who are at the point of death. Because to be a human being is not to be an individual and isolated and alone. But the wonderful thing about being a human being is I am in a community with the whole world. I'm at one with everyone. Why? Because I'm at one with God through his Son, Jesus Christ. And then we go home, again in silence, carrying the emptiness that happens when someone dies. Many of you will have experienced the death of someone that you love, and it leaves an emptiness. And Holy Saturday is the time when we all support each other in this emptiness, because he died. And we don't know what to do. It's an emptiness which I think we have to carry, because it's this emptiness which brings about a very real maturity in a person, because it's an emptiness that you can't do anything about. And the extraordinary thing is when there's the situation is that of which you can do nothing. You have the choice of growing in it or not growing. As is what's happening now, we have a difficult situation. But my prayer for myself and for everyone else is, oh, that I may come out of this a better person, more firmly grounded in God through his Son Jesus Christ. But that's Holy Saturday. Oh, that we might come through this as better people. But again, that's got to do with our attitude. You look at what happened. The attitude of Judas Iscariot led to his suicide. The attitude of John, the beloved disciple, led to him being able to say when he enters the empty tomb, I know he's risen. Transformation. And that's what Holy Saturday, when I've done 80 of them, hopefully I'll be a different person. And that unfolds.
Yeah.
And it brings us now to the Easter Vigil, which we won't be doing the first part, which is the lighting of the Easter fire. But that's how it begins. It begins with the lighting of a fire, because a fire is a symbol of life. It's a symbol of life come back. It's a symbol of warmth coming into the cold. And from that, a taper is lit, and a candle which has been blessed is lit and carried into a dark church. Because that light is you and me. You know, we think that, who am I? You know, I'm the Bishop of Lismore, and the answer is, and so what? I'm just me. I'm no better, no worse than anyone else. And I feel my own fragility, it's just like anyone else does. And I'm no more important, really, than anyone else. I've got an important job. But as a human being, am I better? No. And, you know, human beings don't carry a great deal of self-confidence. There's something good in that and something bad in that. Because we need to be able to stand in the truth of who we are. But the truth of who I am is that candle that is carried into a church. Because a candle can bring light. A single flame on a candle can bring light into darkness. And that Easter candle represents each of us. Yes, blow on it and it'll go out, just like all of us. We recognize that, you know, I'm just a little light, but I am a light. And that's my dignity. That's who I am. And not only that, when you bring many candles together, you have a lot of light. And that's the church. That's the people of God. And that's what we celebrate as we begin the vigil. He has died, but he has risen. And he has, in rising from the dead, he transforms each of us into a light. So that you might feel that you're not great, that you're small. But the little you are is massive. And if your light wasn't there, then there'll be less light, okay? It all gathers together. After that, we had that wonderful time when, and you can read this at home, there are many, many readings in this great vigil, but the readings give to us the story of the way God has worked and blessed his people, working through the Old Testament, coming through to the New Testament, through to the resurrection. And with that, we know our place, because our place is that which is in relationship with God, after which there would normally be baptisms, but we won't have that this year, but there's the blessing of water, because water is the source of life, and Jesus Christ is the source of life. And there's a wonderful thing in that we renew our vows of baptism there, because the hope and prayer is, just as Jesus is the source of my life, through me Jesus will come to others, so that I, working with him, will be a source of life for others. And then after that, we go home rejoicing in what God has done. Give praise to God for your life. Experience the fact that you are alive now. You don't have to go and do great things. You have to travel halfway around the world. Just go outside and look at the blue sky and give thanks to God and just appreciate it. If you know the poems of a great English poet, Coleridge, one of his early poems he wrote up in the Lakes District in his backyard, and it's called "This Lime Tree Bough My Prison," where he complains because, like us, he can't do things. He fell over, he must have sprained his ankle or something, and his friends come up from London, including Charles Lamb, the great essayist. They go walking in Cumbria looking at wonderful sights, what everyone would like to do at Easter time, but he can't go home. And he magnanimously said, "Will you go and walk, don't hang around with me." I think he really wanted them to hang around with him, so they would go off for their walks. And he's sitting at home feeling desperately sad. And then after a while the poem changes about a third of the way through, and he says, "I notice the sun dappling on the flower. I notice the humble bee flying home." And he says, sometimes it's good to be bereft of a promised good, so that we might see beauty in everything. Because we make our joys and our ways of finding beauty rather than letting joy and beauty come to us. And when you make it, every time you have to make something bigger and better. But if we could just find it where we are, in a gentle breeze, in the sound, as I've got around my house, of currawongs and things like that, just to notice what's there. And that's the gift of Easter, to recognize God where God is rather than trying to make something where I might find joy. Because if it's your making, it will soon fail to give you joy. But if you can find God, then you'll have joy anytime. And you can have that now, if you open your eyes.